Hello, everyone, and welcome to OLCV's Town Hall on the Environment.
Hi, greetings, folks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you, Senator. We'll go ahead and kick it off, and I'll introduce myself, and we'll do a land acknowledgement, and then we'll get to some of the questions that were submitted to our special guest today. So my name is Lindsay Schulten. I'm the Executive Director for the Oregon League of Conservation Voters. I use she, her pronouns. I am thrilled to be able to kind of be MC of this event once again with Senator Jeff Merkley, who is an absolute champion on the environment. And somebody who always prioritizes climate change, which says a lot, and we need more people like him for that. So a couple quick Zoom issues. If you want to put on captions, you can go to the bottom of the screen. There's an option for you to add show subtitles. And I think with that, we're gonna also just kind of jump into it after hearing our land acknowledgement with our Central Oregon engagement organizer, Christy Mellum, who's gonna do that for us.
Hi, I'm Christy. I'm an engagement organizer here at OLCV, and I'm going to read our land acknowledgement. Oregon League of Conservation Voters works to protect people and places on the ancestral lands of Indigenous communities who built homes, economies, and trading routes across the land we now call Oregon. We would like to honor and acknowledge Oregon's 9 federally recognized tribes who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. The Klamath tribe of Southern Oregon Plateau, the Burns Paiute of the High Desert East, the Coquille of Southern Oregon's coastal forest, the Confederated tribes of Grand Ronde in the Northern Coast Range, the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua in the Southern Oregon foothills, the Confederated tribes of Umatilla in the Blue Mountains, the Confederated tribes of Siletz in Oregon's northern rainforest, the Confederated tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, the Siuslaw in the windblown southern coast, and the Confederated tribes of Warm Springs in the sunny eastern slopes of the Oregon Cascades. And we would like to recognize all the other Indigenous communities who have not been federally recognized. Oregon was built on broken treaties. The lasting effects of federal and state policy, both past and present, have put Native Americans at a disadvantage for hundreds of years. It is on all of us, whether we are descendants of colonizers or inhabitants of stolen land, to re-educate ourselves and each other. Together, we have the responsibility to push past recognition and demand repatriation and reparations to sovereign tribal nations and Indigenous people across the state.
Thank you so much, Christy. And now we're going to jump in to hearing from Senator Jeff Merkley. I already kind of did a little intro of kind of how much of a champion he is. But to prove it, I have data, which is he has a lifetime 99% score with our National League of Conservation scorecard, as well as getting 100% just this last session that was put out, which was for 2023. So almost perfect. But nobody can be perfect, but he gets very, very close. So we're thrilled to have him here. We're gonna have a little bit of opening remarks from you, Senator. I wanna just give a heads up to some of our first question askers. We had well over 150 people submit questions. We're definitely not gonna try and get through all of them today, but we've got a couple lined up. And the first one after your opening statement will be Chief Doug Barrett. And then after that, Emily Flores, just so that they know to be prepared. And go ahead and take it away, Senator Merkley. I'd love to know kind of what's the latest, what's been going on. I mean, obviously, it's hard not to know about something that happens in 2 weeks, but what have you been working on and what are you excited about?
Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for inviting me to this forum with the Oregon League of Conservation Voters. Your advocacy is essential. Everything we try to accomplish requires passionate, intense outside advocates and then champions who are elected in office working the legislation from the inside. And that combination produces the most successful results. And certainly there's a lot going on. I want to talk about a few of the issues that I know that you're all interested in. First, the Oahe Canyonlands. This has been a top priority for you all. It's a top priority for our state. When we think of our Oregon treasures, Oahe is right up there at the top. And the key to date has been Senator Wyden's bill, which he has worked on for now for quite a few years, and you all have been very engaged in. It protects about 1.1 million acres. There's been a lot of engagement with the community in southeastern Oregon to try to create a win-win coalition to take us forward and get a bill that is passed. We have so many kind of endangered wildlife that is key to the Canyonlands, and encroaching use is continuously creating more challenges, and that's why we push for protection. And one of the things you all have been urging is for the president to designate the Oahe Canyonlands as a national monument. It is now hopeful that we have essentially these two tracks, and one can help improve the odds of the other. Congressman Bentz is now engaged in a way that he hasn't been engaged before, with his team working to lay out their vision of their version of what protection looks like, and negotiating that with Senator Wyden, the lead on the Senate side. So that sort of bipartisan traction can make it possible. Essentially, our wilderness bills get done when there's a group of bills all done together. My very first vote as a US Senator was on a package of about 100 wilderness bills. And that reason for that is because when anyone tries to put through a wilderness bill, someone else says, well, what about the wilderness bill in my state? And eventually every state has things they want to accomplish, and people on both sides of the aisle have wilderness bills they want to accomplish. And there's a big package put together. So that is our hope. And meanwhile, you have the backstop of possibility of a monument. The idea of a monument is not well received by some of the stakeholders, and but just like when on the Cascade Siskiyou, I proceeded to call up Secretary Jewell, and we'd had a lot of engagement. Said this is our one opportunity is now. And that ended up being the tool with which we doubled the size of Cascade Siskiyou and provided critical protections. So between the two efforts, hopefully they'll work together and we'll get this accomplished.
Yeah, having two options is better than one or none. So I'm absolutely with you. We definitely want to get it done.
A second thing I wanted to talk about is biodiversity. Our ecosystems, we often concentrate on kind of one particularly charismatic animal or fish or so on and so forth, but our whole ecosystems are under assault from development, from deforestation, from pesticides, herbicides, from pollution, from invasive species. The experts estimate that we've, as humankind, have had a serious impact on about 3/4 of our land environments and 2/3 of our marine environments. And so this number is rather shocking, but about 1 million species worldwide are threatened with extinction. And 70% of mammals, birds, fish, amphibians, reptiles are in decline. And one of the accelerating factors is climate chaos. So we're in this world that's unsustainable. It certainly is unacceptable in terms of our responsibility to maintain the integrity of the planet we live on and pass that intact, healthy planet on to the next generation. And it's just so devastating to think about how in a single human lifetime, my now 67 years, so much has happened. I found it interesting to go out to, there is a monument out at the confluence of the Sandy River and the Columbia River. And there were a series of monuments designed by the woman who designed the Vietnam War Memorial to commemorate Lewis and Clark's journey. And she took different things from their journals. And one of the things she did is built a duck blind out at that confluence. So it's a whole series of slats that you can see through. And on the inside of the slats is carved into it all the species that were noted in Lewis and Clark's journal, and then an addendum saying whether they were endangered or extinct. And as you stand inside that roughly 10-foot diameter monument and you see how many species since Lewis and Clark are extinct and how many are endangered, it's just making the point that I'm making here. So I've introduced a resolution to call for national biodiversity strategy. So we are coordinating all the pieces of our effort, recognizing that just focusing on one species or another is not the complete picture. I want to talk about plastics. Plastics are such a big environmental problem, and they have received so little attention proportional to the damage that they are doing. And that damage, the more you pay attention, the bigger the damage gets. But the fossil fuel industry makes plastics from fossil gas. So they have no interest in publicizing this environmental challenge. And of course, you have this situation where people live near a petrochemical plant, and that puts off fumes that increase the cancer rates. That's been understood for a long time. But in general, the public relations strategy of the fossil fuel world is to kind of accentuate the 3 R's that we've all heard about: reduce, reuse, recycle. Like, it'll all be okay. Don't worry. We'll just reduce, reuse, recycle. But with plastics, the reality is the 3 B's. Plastics are burned, they're buried, they're borne out to sea, and they're getting into everything everywhere. I used to think about plastics as kind of the lumps that were devoured by animals, and particularly sea life that looks like little pieces of jellyfish, and then their stomachs would be full, and then they'd starve to death and they'd die. They'd wash from the beach, and we'd cut their stomachs open, and we'd see this horrific pack of plastic. This year I held, over this last year, I held 6 hearings on plastics. Nobody has held hearings on plastics before. And so that's kind of breaking new ground. But one of the things at one of the hearings, this scientist brings in this, what looked like a humongous egg. I'd say it was about 2 feet long, maybe 15 inches high, and sets it on the testimony table. And everybody's looking at it going, what is that? What is that? Well, what it was the contents of the stomach of a camel. So he had pulled this egg sized compaction of plastic bags, and the camels eat up the plastic bags. Plastic is not a natural thing in their environment. They see this plastic and it has some smell or whatever, they think it's food, and eventually it's not just sea life. It's the point I'm making here. And that was a very dramatic demonstration. But meanwhile, those chemicals, those plastics are also leaching chemicals. They're leaching into our water, into our soil. And as we get into the micro and nanoplastics, it's no longer just a question of these lumps that are filling up stomachs. It's now the chemicals that are getting into our bodies. Mm-hmm. Over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen this huge increase in the technology that is able to detect very tiny particles of plastic at the micro and nano level. And now you'll be reading, and have been reading, about how they're in our breast milk, they are in our brains, they're in our muscle tissue. And also that these chemicals from the plastics are endocrine disruptors, which means they mess with our reproductive system. And so while you can't draw a straight line in general from a plastic to say this is the cause of X% of increased breast cancer or prostate cancer or so on and so forth, heart disease, number of things, it's certainly a top suspect. And now, for the first time, we're starting to see trials in a laboratory setting with mice to really try to nail down and understand better how these chemicals are affecting our bodies. So anyway, this is why I've been driving this. And the marquee bill is the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. It takes on single-use plastics. It tries to create a circular economy whenever possible, creates a national bottle bill. It protects people in frontline communities from having more chemical production plants. And then parallel to this, I led a congressional delegation to the Global Plastics Agreement conference in Ottawa, Canada this last year. The final version of the treaty is supposed to be signed in theory in December. the U.S. is not part of the high ambition nations. And so Senator Whitehouse was with me, and Senator Gillibrand was with me. Peter Welch came, the 4 senators, we had a couple House members, and we held meeting after meeting after meeting with delegations around the world, essentially saying the U.S. has to become a high ambition nation. We have to be a leader on this, not just say, well, we've kind of, the Biden administration on this has not been great, to put it simply. They've essentially taken the 2015 Paris approach, which is we will all get together and say this is a problem and we'll all do our best to tackle it. Thank you very much. Everybody go home and continue with your lives with nothing that really changes how you behave. That's not acceptable. So there have been some recent announcements about the administration adjusting its position to become more supportive of actual targets and goals and commitments that would have more teeth in them. So let's hope. So many other topics we can discuss, pollinators, the Inflation Reduction Act, the wildfires, the details of the Klamath, the dams, which I'm looking forward to talking about. There's
a lot.
There's a lot. So let's get to your questions.
Okay, great. But I also just want to say thank you for that intro. It's great to just hear what's been going on, and there is a lot. And I think on the plastics piece, just because you talked about that last too, is just, I think that is for sure something that I want to make sure that, we're being as helpful as we can on, because that is so important. I think that's only going to continue to grow in kind of the urgency and importance level that we need to be all fighting for. So thanks for leading on that. And now we'll jump into just some member questions from around the state. When I call your name, I'll have you come on camera to ask your question, introduce yourself and where you live in Oregon. And up first will be Chief Doug Barrett, and then we'll have Emily Flores.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. I appreciate all those words on the plastic. That was really awesome. My name is Chief Doug Barrett from the Confederated Tribes of Kuslo, Umpqua, Siuslaw Indians, Nishinaa, Siuslaw Wanheech. I live in Florence, Oregon, right in the middle of the coast. And frankly, I'm tired of picking up all that garbage on the beach. I go there all the time. There's nothing but plastic, styrofoam. We need to stop making styrofoam ourselves as the U.S. And I applaud you for all that work. And thank you, Lindsay, and all your staff and everybody who put this on. So my question is, how can we work together to protect all of our creatures? And we call them relatives. So, all the creatures in the oceans that live in our waters and our oceans. We call them relatives because especially the salmon, lamprey, that's my 2 focuses, but everything we need to protect. So how can the tribes help you do what you need to do?
Thanks so much, Chief Barrett. And the basic philosophy of thinking of these species as our relatives changes how we look at the world. And so thank you for continuing to bring that to bear. And when I think about how we can all work together, I think of a couple things. One is that we certainly need to be deeply engaged with our tribal communities, with their cultures, their traditions, their indigenous leadership and knowledge. And it was powerful for me to go down on October 5th to the gathering in California, in which the leadership of so many tribes were there, the Klamath, Yurok, the Karuk, the Hupa, the Shasta. And we were celebrating the removal of the 4 dams. We have the Copco 1 and 2 and Iron Gate and JC Boyle. And there's 1 in Oregon and 3 in California. But since I was elected, I've been working to try to push this strategy forward as a way to greatly enhance the ecosystem of the Klamath Basin and facilitate, hopefully, an improved survival of the various fish runs and lamprey runs. And it was exciting that 2 days before we were there, the first sonar detected a Chinook passing Iron Gate Dam. that dam has no fish ladder. Since that was built 60 years ago, and not a single fish has been able to migrate up the river. And then just a couple days ago, the first Chinook were spotted having made the additional roughly, I think it's about 54 miles up to Oregon side of the border, getting to the J.C. Boyle Dam. And so that's exciting. Of course, the dam's not there now, so they can proceed to the Keno Dam. Keno has a fish ladder. We don't know how many will make it up the fish ladder. It's not a great fish ladder. But this is symbolic of many stakeholders working together in what is the largest dam removal project in the United States history. And the stakeholder, I think of it, I realize this was in California and Oregon, but I think of it as the Oregon way, just stakeholders getting into the room, sometimes have been in adversaries of each other, building relationships, trying to have people understand the viewpoints that are brought to bear, and identifying the areas that they share more views than they imagined, and therefore more solutions materialize. I'll compare two things on the coast. We had such a stakeholder effort to establish the test areas for wave energy. And so those are there, and they're not particularly controversial, and now different wave energy devices will be tested. The offshore wind effort was exactly the opposite. Was essentially, we will run over the top. This is BOEM, and BOEM as an agency, the Ocean Energy Management, they're designed to put up oil derricks in the Gulf of Mexico. They think if they run a videotape and allow people to speak into a microphone, they've somehow done consultation with stakeholders. And the result is just huge suspicion, animosity, misunderstandings that are the opposite of people working together to solve a problem. And I kept trying to, I met the head of BOEM, I laid out how they could do it very differently. They did not do it differently. And now they have recognized that they were on the wrong path, and they've set aside their project, and the Oregon process will proceed to examine these possibilities. But the dynamic I'm expressing in terms of your question, how can we all work together? People have to be willing to listen to each other and to try to step into other people's shoes, and then collectively find that they have more in common than they imagined. And the challenges we're facing just get bigger and bigger and bigger. I took the Interior Secretary up on a tour of Oregon, and we went to the brink of the Cascades with Crater Lake. And as we're standing there, the volunteer ranger comes out with a big card. And that big card showed decade by decade how much the snowpack has dropped on average over the last 9 decades. Essentially, it was almost cut in half. We've been losing about 2 2/3 inches on average every year, or to put it differently, 20 feet over 90 years of snowpack. And so this is just like something that is part of the climate chaos impact. But think how that snowpack affects everything: the water for the farmers, the water for our rivers, the water that flushes out those streams, the timing of those flows, the recharging of groundwater. Just kind of one, and we don't necessarily think of the top of the mountains as where climate chaos is having a big impact, but the impact up there all comes downstream to everything else. Anyway, I'll stop there, but we need collaboration and understanding. What we don't need are basically a political system in which Citizens United allows billions of dollars to be put in attack ads to obscure the real effort to understand issues and collaborate on issues and elect leaders to work towards solutions.
I thank you, Senator. That was awesome. Thank you very much for all that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief Barrett. And we're gonna go to Emily Flores next. You can put your camera on, and then after that, we'll have City Councilor Eddie Melendrez.
Is my camera on?
Not yet.
Um,
You want to just go ahead and ask it? I don't,
yeah, I don't,
or we could come back to you if you want, if you feel like you want to figure it out.
I can just ask it.
Okay.
Okay, so my name is Emily. I'm originally from Grants Pass, but I'm currently living in Portland. I'm an OLCV fellow, and my question for you today is, what environmental protection bills are you supporting and how will they help combat the climate crisis?
Climate is kind of everything, isn't it? And I feel like every year, Mother Nature is smacking us upside the head in ways that are just impossible to ignore. And yet, there's a whole series of messages out to folks saying, don't worry, nothing's really changing. It's sunspots or natural cycles or innovation will solve it, or we'll destroy the economy if we try to change the way we use energy. On the positive side, the answer to climate change is simple. Electrify everything with renewable energy. That's all we have to do. But that means we have to collect a lot more renewable energy. It means solar panels on every roof and solar panels over every parking lot. It means a lot more wind turbines, and certainly we can do more with some of the more boutique sources of renewable energy. But basically, if we don't have a massive wind and solar strategy, we never will be able to basically power everything through renewable energy. The impacts are so extensive. And of course, in Oregon, the biggest one we see is the wildfires. But think about ones that are more hidden, like off our coast. The warmer, more acidic water facilitated a disease in the sea stars. Okay, well, the sea stars eat the blue sea urchin. The blue sea urchin population exploded, and it's been wiping out our kelp beds off the coast. And so we now have what scientists call urchin barrens, because where there was this massive kelp forest that played a big role in our ecosystems and in carbon storage, they've been wiped out. Just so there's things seen more obviously, like our fires, and things that are a little less obvious happening underneath the ocean. But this last year, I mean, think about Lahaina burning to the ground. Think about temperature of ocean water off the coast of Florida hitting 100 degrees. Think about water in the Amazon River hitting 100 degrees, and the river dolphins were dying. I mean, and yet here we are in the middle of a presidential campaign, and we have one candidate essentially touting all the above. That's the blue candidate, and the other candidate pushing forward the vision that nothing's happening, even as we suffer these massive hurricanes. Well, so if I sound very worried and disturbed by the failure to move more quickly, I'm very worried and I'm very disturbed, and I'm pushing all the time that we have to accelerate this transition. I was listening to a fellow yesterday on CNN, an auto worker, who said, I'm voting for the Republican candidate for the Oval Office because these electric cars are reducing the amount of work available. And of course, there's a whole series of messages targeted to different populations trying to say that a transition to rebuild our energy economy will somehow hurt our economy. It's a massive amount of work of all kinds for all kinds of professions to rebuild an entire energy system for the United States and for the world. But it's being pitched as a job destroyer rather than a job creator. This is just a tough place we're in. One place where the administration has acted ambitiously was to pause LNG export facilities. I've been immersed in pushing for this, and here's why. In general, the United States has wanted to pretend that fossil gas is part of the solution. You may have heard over the years, it's a bridge to renewable energy. But fossil gas, and I'm calling it fossil, I try to decrease the amount I say natural gas because that's a marketing term from the industry. Fossil gas, methane gas, is in fact a huge collector of heat, a huge trapper of heat, far more ounce for ounce damaging on the climate than is carbon dioxide. We have a tremendous amount of fossil gas, and we've pretended it's a bridge so we can keep developing our fossils while telling other nations they have to decrease theirs. They have to decrease their oil, or they have to decrease their coal, particularly coal. Coal, bad, fossil gas, good. And this story is simply not true. If there's a leakage rate of more than 0.2% in the fossil gas system, in the pipes, then it is essentially equal to local coal in terms of its climate impact over a 2-decade period. Well, our system leaks probably more to 3 to 4%, not 0.2%. So maybe 20 to times or so as much as would make it equal to local coal. And then if you spend the extra energy to liquefy it and to ship it overseas and put it in another set of leaky pipes for distribution, then you're talking about fossil gas being far worse than coal in terms of its impact on climate. Our country pitching this story that fossil gas is wonderful and coal is bad is self-serving to us, but it's not scientifically accurate. And so we're simply paving the path to climate catastrophe by this inauthentic action. And we undermine our credibility around the world because other nations, and I had the chance to go last year to Vietnam and to Indonesia, and I was very struck. They both said, one's a military government in Vietnam, one's a democracy, but a democracy with heavy influence from the palm oil industry and the coal industry in Indonesia. And both governments basically said the same thing. We're with you. We've got our 2030 goal, our 2035 goal, our 2050 goal. We're with you. But in fact, nobody's with us because they're looking at what the US is doing and saying, you want to have your cake and eat it too. You want to expand your fossil infrastructure and tell us to shut down ours. And that doesn't sell. We have to have the power of our example if we're going to succeed in tackling climate. Now, you asked about specific bills, and certainly on plastics, I've introduced the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which I mentioned earlier. I've been advocating for anything that in the realm of keep it in the ground, which is kind of a phrase I really tried to popularize a few years ago. And I introduced a bill that said we have to be 100% neutral by 2050. Some folks said that was acting too slowly. We're not even close to being on track to that. In that first bill that I introduced, it ended the sale of fossil cars by 2040. And people said, that's crazy. Well, now we are starting to understand if we want to electrify everything with renewable energy, we really have to drive this forward. And transportation is a key part of that. The burning of fossil fuels for transportation, the burning of fossil fuels in buildings. There are a few bills that colleagues' bills that I want to acknowledge. Senator Markey's Charge Act, which is to facilitate the construction of more transmission for electrical energy to move it around the country. Senator Sanders' End Polluter Welfare Act that says, why do we still have all these subsidies for coal and oil and gas and so forth? So that's a few bills I want to highlight. Understand this, Citizens United decision that allows fossil fuel companies and other special interests, but fossil fuel companies had net profits in the United States last year of about $300 billion. If they put 1% of that in the political system, that's $3 billion. That's enough to essentially, through intimidation and through support for their favorite candidates, to control our democracy. And that is a huge problem in taking this on. So we also have to recognize that democracy has to be continually maintained to actually produce government by and for the people. And right now, the powerful, with a combination of the lawyers, the lobbyists, the regular campaign money, the Citizens United, dark money, the media campaigns, and if all that fails, the filibuster in the Senate prevents actually democracy from serving the people. And on that filibuster piece, that's a piece I'm particularly focused on, because you have to have the cooperation of the Republicans to put a good policy bill on the floor of the Senate. You can put on a tax bill by simple majority with no cooperation of the minority that gives away billions or trillions of dollars to the most powerful interests in America. But to do good policy, try to fix it legislatively, the Republicans, when the minority, have a veto over those bills ever getting considered, and that has to change. So one of the bills I am concerned about right now is trying to slow down the mentioned Barrasso bill. It's using the goal of increasing transmission of electricity to essentially serve as a vehicle for lots of things that the fossil and gas industry want in order to expand. And so thank you to the League of Conservation Voters and multiple other environmental groups for pointing this out. But this bill, this Manchin-Barrasso bill, it has a lot of momentum. And why does it have momentum? Because essentially they found some think tanks that will say we can massively expand our fossil gas in America, but because we will export a bunch of it, it'll raise the price of gas in America, which means that Americans will use less gas. So that'll offset what we're transporting overseas. So we can have our cake and eat it too. And the fact is, this is so completely wrong. It's a vision, everyone, wouldn't that be wonderful for us to be able to massively expand our fossils, and somehow we actually help climate in the process. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. And thank you to LCV for helping to take this on and try to put a little truth into the conversation.
All right, thank you.
So much. Next, we're going to go to City Councilor Eddie Melendrez, and then after that, we have Jen Fuji.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. You can go ahead and go on camera now, too.
Yes, it's not, there you go. It wasn't allowing me, but thank you so much.
We can see you now.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you, Senator Merkley, for being here with us today. I appreciate your leadership in Oregon and on so many issues we care about, including climate and conservation. I'd like to talk a little more about that a little bit, but my name is Eddie Melendrez. I'm a city council member with the city of Ontario, Oregon. I'm also a boxing coach and a proud father of my daughter, Selena. I'm here as one of hundreds of local leaders and residents who really want to see the Oahe Canyonlands permanently protected. I'm joined by my Ontario Chamber of Commerce, the mayors of Vail, Ontario, and the Four Rivers Cultural Center, and dozens of other local businesses and leaders who have called for you to work on and the Biden administration to work to designate the Oahe Canyon National Monument. We know a national monument is good for our local community, our state, and for the Oahes. I appreciate you described the national monument as a good plan B option in the event your legislation does not pass. So if your legislation hasn't passed in 2024, where do we go from there? We are worried about missing this opportunity, and we know you're also worried about not getting permanent protections for the Oahes. Is there a path that you can see a national monument? How do we work with you to get this done? And I appreciate your time, Senator Merkley. Thank you.
Yeah, so Eddie, I don't have a lot to add to what I commented on earlier. And I'm realizing that my answers have been a little too long in terms of getting to so many questions you've all asked. So I'll be fairly brief here, which is the advocacy that you all are bringing forward is making it possible to win this battle one way or the other, to either win it through legislation or win it through a national monument. I do not think the administration has done the legwork that will enable them to do a declaration, say in December or January, the way that we succeeded with Cascade Siskiyou. The I know because I led that effort what it took to get the executive branch to the point of declaring a monument. So I think the key here is we either need to win the legislative battle or we need to be prepared to go on to full national monument mode with the new administration. Now, depending on which administration we're dealing with, that door may be slammed shut or it may be wide open. But there are times that you come to a recognition that you're never going to get a credible partner in terms of the House of Representatives, and then you've got to pursue a different path. And Senator Wyden has been the lead on this, so there's a certain part I just want to keep acknowledging his leadership and his team's work on this. But I'm sure they're going through the same version of working with Bentz right now that Bentz is engaged to see if the legislative path is credible. If it's not credible, then we're going to have to move to the monument strategy.
Thank you again, Senator Merkley. I really appreciate your time. I've had the honor to meet Wyden in person, but not you yet. So next time you visit, I'll try to be here in town. Thank you.
Okay, I look forward to it. Thank you.
And then we'll go to Jen Fuji. After that, we have Patty Falkenstein.
Hi, Senator. Thanks for being here with us today. Early in my career, I fought wildland firefighter for the U.S. Forest Service. And so I've been very concerned about wildfires and other climate emergencies. So my question for you is, what are you doing to help communities be more resilient to climate emergencies?
Well, as I think about the Labor Day fires from 2020, and I drove 600 miles from the border with Washington State to the border with California, and then back again, never got out of the smoke. We ended up with 6 communities burned to the ground, another 6 communities seriously damaged. And that was kind of such a horrific and dramatic impact of fires. But every year, most years we don't have a neighborhood burned to the ground, but what we do have are fires everywhere. At any one point, we have 100 fires burning in July and August. We had at that point more than 24 that were major fires, and most of the time during those 2 months. There's a direct impact on the ecosystem. There's certainly the smoke impact that occurs, and it affects our economy in all kinds of ways that people might not think too much about. I mean, many people are kind of aware of the outdoor sports being constantly challenged by being worried about the fires in the forest. There's also the smoke affecting the grapes, or the smoke that destroys the furniture stores can't sell their furniture because it now all smells of smoke, and so on and so forth. On the fire part, I'm really pushing for us to do kind of the best scientifically informed version of forest management. And in some places, it's clear what that means than in others. Big difference between the understanding of kind of the pine forest on the east side and the Douglas fir forest on the west side. Different types of forests, different dynamics in terms of how you open them up, whether you slow the fire down, and again, much as and there's more consensus around the ponderosa pine forest than the fir forest. But one of the things for sure is to help focus on the WUI interface, the wildland urban interface, to try to say, if we're doing a certain amount of work, it may be cheaper to do it 30 miles away, but hey, that's not going to help protect that town from approaching fires. So let's really concentrate the work what would have the most impact on protecting our rural towns. One of the goals I've had is to not run out of money to fight fires. And so I've been using my role in the Interior Committee, leading the Interior Spending Committee to do that. We haven't run out of money for years, but sometimes we do run out of assets. That is not enough helicopters, not enough planes to fight fires, or not enough crews. And particularly when fires light up in multiple states at the same time. So this is in the mitigation realm. Well, mitigation also is complicated because we have massive amounts of land and modest amounts of areas to help make them more fire resilient. And in climate mitigation, it's not just forests. Of course, that's a big part of, and grasslands, a big part of our state, but the impacts are different in different parts of the country. I've secured something like 6.1 billion for fire suppression preparedness. We're doing a lot more in terms of thinning, mowing, and prescribed burns in targeted areas. Funding secured about 9 million for wildfire smoke mitigation grants. I've introduced bills like the Wildfire Resilient Communities Act to really increase federal wildfire resiliency projects. And really advocated for our landscape collaboratives that are working together to try to produce more resilient landscapes while also producing trees that go to our mills. And if you have a mill, you have a way to help process the cellulose from the forest in an affordable way. But if you don't have that mill, you don't. And which is, for example, John Day is a great example of that. That's why we're so worried about the potential loss of the John Day mill right now, because it will make it a lot harder to do the mitigation work. We introduced the Wildfire Smoke Emergency Declaration Act, trying to make it clear that we never really thought about smoke emergencies in the past, but that's a real thing. Those are a few thoughts. I'm going to try to be a little briefer in my answers, because so I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Sounds good. We'll try and sneak in a couple more questions. We know you're incredibly busy and so grateful for all your time. So we'll go to Patty, and then after that, Jim home, and we'll probably have to leave it there. But go ahead, Patty.
Good afternoon, Senator. My name's Patty Falkenstein. I'm a care provider here in Tigard. It's good to see you again. And I've noticed here in Tigard, we have very few pollinators and bugs this year. I think I've seen one bumblebee. And I'm wondering what you can say about better regulation of pesticides.
Patty, we're really going through an insect Armageddon. When I was a kid down in Southern Oregon, and we'd drive anywhere up and down the state, the windshield would be just covered with bugs, and like every gasoline stop, like kids have to get out and scrub all the windows. It's really a rare moment now that that's necessary. The pesticides, herbicides are a big factor. And the efficiency of our farming, which leaves a lot less kind of edges of the fields where insects propagate. There are a few particular pesticides that have been noted as the kind of the worst. A few of those we've banned, others have not, but the replacements are bad too. It's really a difficult challenge that I don't think we have a good handle on. One area specifically on the pollinators that I've focused on is the Western monarch. In part because it is a species that attracts attentions. You know, it's the most common butterfly from the school box, the lunch box, to people wearing butterflies on their clothing. The Western monarch has since 1980 had a drop of about 99%. And so what all is going on there? Well, one is you have a lot less milkweed on the edges of the field, because the fields are more efficiently farmed, so there's less edge, and then the overdrift of the herbicides basically kills the milkweed, so around the edge. The second thing that's going on is you have time shifts in terms of climate change, so that the natural rhythm of how butterflies leave the coast in California, because the western monarch overwinters in California, not in Mexico. When it leaves, you have to have the right type of milkweed coming up at the right moment, or that first generation gets decimated, and then you have very few monarchs. We were down a couple of years ago to only about 2,000 monarchs counted in the overwinter census, and that was a 99.9% drop. Now we're up to several 100,000 because we had a couple good seasons, yay. But so how do we tackle this? Well, I've been introducing a series of meetings and bills to try to kind of accentuate action. In 2022, I held a Monarch Butterfly Summit in partnership with the Department of Interior, brought all the experts together to have them all discuss in the same place the strategies. We proceeded to implement the Western Monarch Butterfly Rescue Fund and Conservation Plan. I've secured about $18 million to help finance that. And then one of those pieces, by the way, is to have our highways become places where the edges of the highways, clubs can adopt sections of the side and do pollinator gardens. And kind of like you see these signs that says so-and-so is cleaning up a highway, you could see a sign with a local Rotary or the Garden Club or the local chapter of Oregon League of Conservation Voters, whoever is doing a pollinator garden. A key piece of that, it's the funding is there, but the Department of Transportation has been very slow to roll that out. They do have a request for proposals out right now, so the gears are grinding slowly, but the legislation's been done, the funding's been done. That's a vision that could happen. We could start to see these highway pollinator gardens. The idea actually came from Lamar Alexander, who had a program like this in Tennessee. So a senator from Tennessee, a conservative senator, I partnered with and said, hey, why don't we try to make this a national opportunity? I'm also proposing that we have conservation easements related to land that is basically put into a pollinator easement, where the commitment would be seeding with pollinator plants, and in this case, and throwing milkweed as well. So we have land that could become an alternative to a lot of the land we've lost on regular agricultural land. And then we need to have people able to buy pollinator friendly plants. I discovered that some plants we buy that we think the pollinators might like have been bred to be beautiful, but no longer have much nectar. Oh, oops, that's a problem. That's not what you want to plant. Others, when you buy them from the garden store, are coated with insecticides that could actually damage. And so you need to, I've proposed that we have essentially pollinator safe sign. Maybe it's a monarch symbol, maybe it's a bumblebee symbol, but it basically says, if you buy these, you're not buying something coated with pesticides that will actually hurt the insects. So Mary and I set out to do a pollinator garden a couple of years ago, and once more we learned, we stopped because we couldn't figure out just the ease with which we would buy the right things and plant the right things. Anyway, that's the loss of insects is very dramatic. It's not just a US problem. Europe is often noted as doing a lot better on the pesticide issue and the herbicide issue. They have the same collapse in their insects as we have. I don't know if it's a little less, a little more, but they're talking about the insect Armageddon in Europe as well. So a big challenge.
Thank you, Patty. I actually planted milkweed just this last spring because of the knowledge that you kind of shared, I think at a town hall we had with you last year. So well, hoping a little bit can help. We're 2 minutes till 2. Do you want to try and do one quick question, or I know you gotta go, so I want to respect that we're almost at 2 o'clock.
Well, yeah, let's take one
Well,
more question, and I will do speed
we're in the
answers.
speed round. Okay, Jim, you're gonna join us for our final speed round question.
Good afternoon, Senator Merkley. I'm Jim Home, and I live in Corvallis. And my question is, in order to replace fossil fuels with clean energy alternatives, we need to significantly improve the energy grid. How can we increase transmission capacity, protect the environment, and do both in a timely manner?
A couple thoughts. Yes, moving energy between essentially energy hubs, or moving it from where there is a lot of renewable energy and getting it to where there's a lot of need for electricity, are all key transmission challenges. I think about if people want to just get a handle on this, it used to be that, and I think it still is true, that we shipped a lot of energy in the summer to California because of their air conditioning. They shipped a lot of energy to us in the winter because we spend more energy heating our homes, just as an example of moving between areas. It's really hard to establish new transmission lines. We saw this with Broadway to Hemingway line that was under consideration when I first came into office. It still hasn't been built. I can't tell you how many town halls I had where people asked to meet before and after to discuss their objections to a transmission line. Partly it was view shed. Partly was their concern about electronic EMP magnetic pulse coming off the line, and whether it would affect the health of their families. Part of it was because they didn't want their crop dusters to worry about lines. Partly it's because they didn't want the towers being put onto their property or onto their neighbor's property, and so forth. We have to take our existing channels and often try to go with slightly wider corridors and higher towers to carry more electricity, because it's so hard to do new transmission routes. The focus has really been on permitting reform, but if you really probe it, it often isn't the permits that are slowing things down in terms of the government gears. It's often the preparation to submit the permit, which is a question of how much the advocates are for the transmission line or do their homework, and then having enough folks to process that application. And so it isn't the environmental hurdles, it's the bureaucratic funding for enough staff. There is a big push by the fossil world to use the permitting question for renewable energy as a way to strike down the obstacles for more fossil infrastructure. And that really, to me, is the heart of what's going on with Manchin-Barrasso bill. And there's an interesting dynamic here that we have to be aware of, which is, I think of the wind and renewable and the solar industries as kind of the heroes. But the companies, once they're in gear, then they want to advance their company's interests as quickly as possible. And so they've started to partner with the fossil gas industry. And because the fossil gas industry is very powerful, well, this is a real dilemma we're facing, because knocking down the environmental burdens that allows more expansion of fossils is exactly the wrong way to go. But the renewable companies trying to maximize what they can get done know they can do more if they're in partnership with a powerful partner, because their interest is no longer kind of, if I'll put it this way, protecting the planet. Their interest is maximizing their annual growth. I'm all for Senator Markey's Charge Act, which does the permitting for renewables. And for the similar work, I've talked with Representatives Levin and Caston on the House side about their bill. Their bill's also very good, but beware the fox in sheep's clothing of Manchin-Barrasso.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to all the people who were able to join and ask questions. Thank you very, very much to Senator Merkley and for staying a couple minutes over. Appreciate your time and all the work that you do. We're going to ask attendees to hang around, but we're going to let you go because we know you got a lot going on. But just so much gratitude for all the ways that you are a champion on these issues and really an expert too, to come and share kind of, and I think we all can learn a lot from what you shared today.
Lindsay, thank you so much for inviting me. And because of the paralysis at the federal level, and I described kind of those forces ranging from Citizens United money to the filibuster in the Senate, it means that the states' action is often more effective at the state level. And you all are engaged in having Oregon be a leader on these issues. So much more likely we're going to accomplish more through your advocacy in the Oregon State Legislature than we are nationally. I mean, we need to accomplish it nationally. We can't give up on that pressure, that effort. But the dynamics of how our political system is working are quite discouraging on the federal level. So let's tackle this in every direction. Let's use the courts in a productive fashion. Let's use our state legislatures, our local legislatures, as well as the federal. Again, just thank you to all of you on this call who are advocates, recognizing that this responsibility we have to do better by our environment in ways modest and large is enormous, and we need to do a lot more, and that's what you're trying to make happen. So God bless you, and I'll see you down the road.
Thank you so much for all of that. I totally agree with everything you said, every level, but state level also. So thank you, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Take care now.
And for attendees, hang out for a minute. I'm gonna pass it over to Eliza Walton on our team, our coalition director, with a quick next step for everyone.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Eliza Walton. I'm OLCV's coalition director. Again, a big thank you to Senator Merkley for taking the time to share these great updates with all of us today. I do just want to take a moment to talk about what comes next while we have all of you here. And, we want to keep this momentum going for campaigns like permanent protection for the Owyhee Canyonlands that we heard about, as well as other critically important environmental issues that were discussed today. And we need all of your help to do that. So one of the most impactful things that you can do to support progress on all of these topics that we covered here today is submitting a letter to the editor or an LTE to your local newspaper and or the Oregonian. So for those who aren't familiar, LTEs are a brief opinion article, typically around 200 words, which are written by community members such as yourselves, or to communicate with your peers and neighbors about current events, local issues, or legislation that you think is important. LTEs serve an essential community education function and are a vital part of diverse and democratic information space. Much of the population gets their news from online and print newspapers. So a letter to the editor is just a really great way to share your thoughts and opinions on these issues that, we care about most, and to make sure that, folks are engaged around you. So OLCV does have a toolkit with talking points for our Owyhee Protection Campaign, which we're going to drop in the chat for anyone who's interested. And our organizing staff, Kaya, Christy, and Laurel, who have been helping out immensely behind the scenes here today, are all available to offer support, whether that's proofreading or editing or just answering any questions that you have. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help. I also wanted to just highlight this really beautiful painting that's on the screen here. It is of the Owyhee Canyonlands, and it was painted by Taylin Biza. Taylin is 17 years old and was born in Eugene, Oregon, and now lives in Boise, Idaho. They submitted this piece to OLCV's Owyhee Art Contest, and it was selected as the winner. OLCV staff were really impressed with the attention to detail of all the different kinds of animals that you can see all around the painting. But we also got so many amazing submissions that we decided to create an art book full of all of these different pieces to share at our next virtual town hall. So we'll be in touch with more details about the art book and the virtual town hall, so stay tuned. And just in closing, I want to say a big thank you again to Senator Merkley and his staff, as well as the rest of the OLCV team for helping make this town hall a success. And thank you folks in the audience for joining us today. I hope everyone has a good rest of your afternoon, and I hope we can see you again sometime soon. Thanks so much.